Perhaps no artistic medium has acted as a more accurate cultural barometer than the popular song, charting the nation's passions and pastimes with color and immediacy.
A great song will transcend genre, it will transcend time, it will transcend the artist that first popularized it.
On some level, a 3-minute song can communicate across cultural, social, political lines in a way that almost nothing else can. We can't underestimate the importance of these artifacts of our lives, really.
Our memories are made up of songs. The songs we knew as kids, the songs we had with our girlfriends or boyfriends. They call it the soundtrack of America.
Nearly every song that became part of that soundtrack, including Take Me Out to the Ballgame, was crafted by some of America's most talented composers and lyricists. And between 1885 and 1935, they were employed by the publishers of Tin Pan Alley.
For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball.
At the turn of the 20th century, Americans reveled in newfound comfort, convenience, and prosperity. The automobile and airplane made their debut, and along with the rest of the country, a group of creative businessmen on Tin Pan Alley celebrated their arrival.
Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry Oldsmobile. Down the road of life we'll fly, automobile bling, you and I.
Through the church we'll swiftly steal, then our wedding bells will peal. You can go as far as you like with me in my merry Oldsmobile.
One of the biggest selling songs about the turn of the century was a song called Daisy Bell. Nobody knows Daisy Bell if you call it that, but if you say it's called A Bicycle Built for Two, most people are familiar with it.
But you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two.
We can't be sure today whether that song sold bicycles or whether those bicycles sold songs. They were so tightly together, but they both went into the millions. Everybody wanted a bicycle, everybody was singing Daisy Bell.
You look sweet on the seat of a bicycle built for two.
Only 15 years earlier, this thriving music publishing industry didn't exist.
Before Tin Pan Alley, there really wasn't a popular music business. There were song publishers all over the country, but their main line of business was selling sheet music for piano lessons and church hymnals. They were not terribly interested in popular songs.
That changed at the end of the 19th century, when upright pianos, mass-produced and affordably priced, began to appear in American middle-class living rooms.
And that was the center of home entertainment, because before the early 20th century, there were no phonographs, obviously no radio, no TV. The only way you could have music in your home was to produce it yourself on the piano. So family entertainment consisted of people sitting around the piano singing popular songs.
Growing demand spurred some New York City entrepreneurs to hire composers and lyricists and start publishing sheet music.
One thing the Tin Pan Alley learned, like all businesses do, something successful, you copy it. You make your own version as fast as you can. Something showed up in the news, get a song about it right away. I don't think Lindbergh had touched the ground before they were singing Lucky Lindy.
Little girl picks up the telephone, after her mother died and says, "Hello, Central, give me heaven, that's where Mommy is." That's a newspaper story. Turn that into a song.
This is what was in the news, this is what people knew about, this is what they want to hear a song about.
I always like to think of Tin Pan Alley as working almost like an assembly line. A composer would be working on a melody, a lyricist would be working right beside him on a lyric, the publisher would be looking it over, and when you walked into a department store, the first two things you saw were the candy counter and the sheet music racks. And they were both delectable.
But sheet music couldn't sell itself. Someone had to play the songs. So Tin Pan Alley's publishers hired uniquely talented salesmen called song pluggers to help them make the sale.
A song plugger is simply somebody who takes a written song and essentially auditions it in one form or another for a potential artist to sing. I started off plugging my own songs, so I know something of walking in humbly with hat in hand with a song under my belt saying, "Here, would you like to try this?"
You're still going in a room and, convincing somebody to do that song, aren't you? Whether it's Al Jolson or Cher, you still have to sell a song. You still have to be passionate about it and convince somebody and say, "This is the right song for you. It's a great, great song for you. Come on, try it out."
For the late 19th century, the Alley's business methods were cutting edge, but the music was old-fashioned. Sentimental ballads, popular since the Revolutionary War, were the Alley's bread and butter.
A sentimental ballad was a long, detailed piece of drama. It had to tell a story. And it had to be a story with some detail. It couldn't just be, I met the girl and I'm in love with her and I'm going to sing about it. No, I met the girl, I lost the girl went away, the girl froze in the winter, I found her tombstone 6 months later. It had to be a complete melodramatic story.
After the ball is over.
Tin Pan Alley's first big hit was a sentimental ballad published in 1892. After the Ball was a poignant story of lost love.
It had this wonderful melody and this wonderful sentimental feeling about after the ball and how beautiful it was.
After the stars are gone, many a heart.
People love that, and it is sentimental, but in a very sweet, real way.
Why love songs endure? People are always going to fall in love. In 2007, 1890. I mean, that doesn't change. That doesn't change.
Before Tin Pan Alley, hits sold in the tens of thousands. After the Ball sold more than 5 million copies, and it earned the song's writer, Charles K. Harris, a fortune. His office sign became Tin Pan Alley's mantra, songs written to order. Around the turn of the 20th century, Harris and his competitors moved into a block of undistinguished brownstones on a side street in Lower Manhattan.
People assumed that there was no Tin Pan Alley. It was just a reference. They didn't realize there was a Tin Pan Alley. There was a place that was the heart of the music business.
If you can imagine a street where almost all the buildings are music publishing offices. And in those offices are tiny little cubicles.
An upright piano, a cheap one, crammed in a room, banging away all day long, different songs.
When Monroe K. Rosenfeld was doing a story on this incredible new thriving industry, the popular music business, he was up on West 28th Street listening to this cacophony of tinny piano sounds coming out of the windows and compared it to the clanging of tin pans.
So it was nicknamed Tin Pan Alley. Once it got into the newspaper that way, it stuck.
Soon, Tin Pan Alley was credited with popularizing a dynamic new sound, ragtime.
And it was very exciting music. It had a great street sound to it, very much like rock and roll has, or at least rock and roll had in the beginning.
To me, ragtime was the beginning of this huge evolution of American music. It's heavily influenced from a part of the world that I'm from, the American South, this sort of left-hand stride piano technique. which one could hear in New Orleans probably in the 1860s and 1870s. And it has a huge African-American influence. There's a rhythmic influence that's not available to a lot of Western music up to that point.
The music itself ragged the notes, which is the expression ragtime came from. You took the note and you bent it. You slung it over here a little bit. You came back. Ragtime fooled around with music, but it also fooled around with words. And it used all the slang, the latest slang that you can have. It made up words, and people just loved it.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime girl.
You get, hello, my baby, instead of, your dearest heart.
If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me then.
You just want a little short verse that says, I got a telephone, and now I'm going to use it too, and go into the chorus. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
Send me a kiss by wire. Honey, my heart's on fire.
So that the chorus becomes this exuberant, lyrical, very rhythmic expression, which sounds fresh and dynamic like a new century.
Scott Joplin, one of several African-American composers on Tin Pan Alley, became known as the king of ragtime. He went on to write nearly 40 rags. Maple Leaf Rag was his most popular.
Hey, oh my honey, you better hurry and let's meander. Ain't you going to the leader man, the ragged meter man? Oh my honey.
But ragtime's biggest hit wasn't in ragtime. It was about ragtime.
Brass band, ain't you coming along? Say, come on here, come on here.
It was called Alexander's Ragtime Band, and it was the first big hit for the song's composer, Irving Berlin.
And if you can't hear the Swanee River, in the ragtime, come on and hear Alexander's Ragtime Band.
Berlin, who began his career as a Tin Pan Alley lyric writer, went on to embody not just the potential of Tin Pan Alley, but, it was said, the history of American music.
Maybe the greatest lyric writer of all, in my opinion, the one who inspired me most of all, was Irving Berlin. He was a genius. He identified everything. He identified show business where there's no business, like show business, Christmas with White Christmas, Easter with the Easter Parade. And if you look back at the songs he wrote, they were simple, but never simplistic. So believable, everybody identified with them to this day.
Alexander's Ragtime Band was written not just for singing, but for dancing. And ragtime's lively beat inspired Tin Pan Alley's composers for decades. Dance steps, including the turkey trot, bunny hug, camel walk, and grizzly bear, had the country on its feet. Everybody was doing it. And that became the title of one of the Alley's biggest dance hits.
Everybody's doing it, doing it, doing it. Everybody's doing it, doing it, doing it. See that ragtime couple over there? Watch 'em throw their shoulders.
That song, and Tin Pan Alley, became lightning rods for social conservatives.
It's there, there. Everybody's doing it, doing it, doing it. Everybody's doing it.
Everybody's Doing It by Irving Berlin was a scandalous song. This was the height of the dance craze. It was the height of ragtime, both of which, in the minds of people who wanted to protect middle-class morality, spelled the corruption of youth, the end of civilization as we know it.
A wave of filthy and suggestive vulgarizing music has inundated the land. It is artistically and morally depressing and should be suppressed by press and pulpit.
Everybody's doing it now.
But Tin Pan Alley's publishers weren't swayed by the critics. They were writing for mainstream America, and their songs reflected the country's changing values and demographics.
My wild the sweetest flower that grows. You may search
In the late 1800s, Tin Pan Alley began publishing songs that addressed America's growing immigrant population.
and someday for my sake she may let me take the bloom from my wild Irish rose.
I see them in a way as songs that recognized and accepted the presence of these new immigrants. They were poking fun at them, but the very act of poking fun at them includes them. They're part of the melting pot. They're part of America.
Still, some of these songs were damaging. One category, known as coon songs, perpetuated negative racial stereotypes.
There really is a racial line that the coon songs draw. If you look at the sheet music, those are hideous racist caricatures of blacks. They are people who you laugh at, but do not really include into your culture.
In 1914, Americans became consumed by events overseas. The decimation of Europe, World War I, had begun. President Woodrow Wilson was determined to keep America out of the war, and Tin Pan Alley rallied in support.
Tin Pan Alley has to be about what the American public is thinking and feeling. When the war breaks out in Europe, the feeling of most Americans is, we don't want anything to do with it.
Tin Pan Alley in a song declares, we're all Americans now. Immigrant songs cease. A guy named Al Piantadosi, who in 1908 writes, my Mariucci, she taken a steamboat, toot, toot. Now he writes, I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier.
3 years later, when the U.S. joined the conflict, Tin Pan Alley reversed its tune.
When America gets into the war, patriotism runs very high, and nobody's gonna buy that song anymore. They actually took, I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier, and they changed the lyric. I didn't raise my boy to be a mollycoddle. In other words, I didn't raise my boy to be a coward. He's gonna go.
When Irving Berlin, who's the biggest songwriter now on Tin Pan Alley, gets drafted, he's stationed at an army camp on Long Island, and he writes a World War I song, but he takes the ordinary soldier's perspective. Not should we get involved over there, but do I have to get up in the morning for reveille?
Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed. For the hardest blow of all is to hear.
Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. It expresses the everyday buck private's misery at being a soldier.
Someday I'm going to murder the bugler.
And then that becomes a big Tin Pan Alley hit.
But first I'm going to get the pup, the guy who wakes the bugler up, and spend the rest of my life in bed.
Between 1914 and 1918, hundreds of wartime songs came out of the alley. But one song emerged as a patriotic anthem that both rallied those in the trenches and united the public back home. Composer George M. Cohan's Over There.
Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums humming everywhere, so prepare.
In November 1918, the Allies signed the armistice, putting an end to the war.
We'll be over, we're coming over.
The American public celebrated, and Tin Pan Alley supplied the beat.
And we won't come back till it's over there.
After World War I, the music industry, like the rest of the country, kind of breathed a sigh of relief. And the music of the period was about forgetting the past, not worrying about the old ways, not even thinking about the future.
songs like Ain't We Got Fun, Button Up Your Overcoat, really set the tone of the decade. And Tin Pan Alley, again, partly responds to, but also creates that frenetic sense of life in the 1920s.
You could just see people dancing and having a good time. You know, that's before the Depression. So like it's like before the curtain comes down, let's just have a good time.
Every morning, every evening, ain't we got fun, huh? Not much money, oh, but honey, ain't we got fun, huh? There's nothing surer. The rich get rich and the poor get laid off. In the meantime, in between time, ain't we got fun?
Perhaps the song that captured that carefree spirit best was a Tin Pan Alley tune called the Charleston. In the early 1920s, Americans found more ways to entertain themselves. They headed to Broadway. And sensing a gold mine, Tin Pan Alley went with them.
In the year 1927, over 200 musicals opened on Broadway. 200 musicals. Each one with a score of, a dozen songs. This is what Tin Pan Alley wanted. This is what they needed. Nowhere else in the world were so many songs being written so fast for such a concentrated point of time. Tin Pan Alley loved it.
One of Broadway's greatest composers had gotten his start on Tin Pan Alley. His name was George Gershwin. And he, along with his brother Ira, who wrote lyrics, went on to compose 20th century classics, including Fascinating Rhythm, Swonderful, and the romantic ballad, Someone to Watch Over Me.
There's in the human heart a longing for romantic love that never goes away, never goes out of style, no matter what is happening. Someone to Watch Over Me remains a clear favorite in terms of its sophistication and its sense of care and emotion and intimacy.
I just think it's one of the most beautiful songs anybody will ever write. I just love it. What it says is beautiful and the melodies is gorgeous. It's classic. With the right song, you can change hearts and minds.
In 1927, yet another venue for Tin Pan Alley's songs appeared on the horizon. Hollywood introduced sound to the movies. The first talking picture, The Jazz Singer, opened to wide acclaim.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you.
So what are we going to have the jazz singer sing in 1927? Blue Skies.
Blue skies, smiling at me.
We're going to have them sing songs that have already proven themselves to be hits. Which is a big hit of 1926 for Irving Berlin.
Bluebirds, singing a song.
All of these songs from Tin Pan Alley, a decade before they made their way into the Broadway musical, now they're going to get even a bigger showcase in Hollywood musicals.
Movies popularize songs. To this day, I've had a lot of huge hits through movies. If you find the right song in the right movie and it connects to a moment and an emotion, there's nothing like it. People walk out of the movie theater, that song is a souvenir, that song takes them back. Just like a song takes you back to when you grew up or whatever, that song takes you back to that movie. When you can have a song that can resonate like that, that's pretty cool.
Nothing but blue skies around now on.
On the heels of the jazz singer, Hollywood produced a string of musicals. And many Tin Pan Alley composers, including Berlin and Gershwin, wrote the soundtracks. But they didn't do so from the alley.
What happens is that the Hollywood studios are just as shrewd in business terms as the Tin Pan Alley publishers. So Warner Brothers, Paramount, MGM, they're making big bucks. They are buying out the Tin Pan Alley publishers, their whole catalog of songs, and they're taking their songwriters out of the cubicles of Tin Pan Alley, putting them in Hollywood studios and saying, do the same thing you did on Tin Pan Alley, but now you're writing for us.
Now, for the first time, a song belonged to a studio, where before it belonged to a publisher. The studio said, hey, we got Singin' in the Rain. And they used it. They put it in 4 movies, you know? It's our song. We can use it as much as we want.
If you listen, I'll sing you a sweet little song of a flower.
By the early 1930s, the way Americans experienced music changed radically. People wanted to listen to their favorite songs performed by others, and they had the means to do it. More and more Americans had phonographs and radios in their living rooms.
Come in, Doctor. Oh, with you, Simon Pettigrew. Yeah, but unless you...
Remarkably, Tin Pan Alley's publishers didn't feel threatened by the fledgling recording industry. They were confident that the piano would regain its place as the center of home entertainment. Their lack of vision helped contribute to the Alley's demise.
The sheet music publishers of Tin Pan Alley never saw the record industry as allies. When, if they had allied with these people who were making records, they could have made tons more money. And they did the same thing with radio. They saw radio as the enemy. So it was one place where the Tin Pan Alley businessman sense really broke down. Tin Pan Alley was about people buying and playing and singing their own songs. And records and radio were about people listening to other people sing the songs. And the Tin Pan Alley publishers never understood that.
By the late 1930s, most of Tin Pan Alley's original publishers had either been swallowed up by Hollywood or made irrelevant by the growing popularity of recorded music. Sheet music and the parlor piano would become relics of the past.
Many the hopes that have vanished after the ball.
Though Tin Pan Alley itself is gone, the American popular song still commands an enormous audience.
Come on along, let me take you by the hand. Meet the man, he's the man, who's the leader of the band.
The contributions of the men and women who, before anyone else, realized the potential of this influential medium live on in words and music.
Somehow in America, the sense that we were starting something fresh, I think, couldn't have found a better expression than in the popular song.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss.
Suddenly, on 28th Street in New York, you have a group of enormously talented musicians and writers who are not creating music just for the elite. They're creating music for you and me.
If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes you're out.
As a songwriter, I think of the countless thousands of hours that people poured into this new profession, making this joyful noise every day. It represents a real moment in American culture where we're saying, this is who we are, and everybody gets to participate.
Yet I'm longing to share answer do. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage, I can't afford a carriage, but you look sweet on the seat of a bicycle built, of a bicycle built, of a bicycle built for two.